What's up, Matthew? How are you?
Hey, how you doing, man?
All good, man.
Doing great.
Yeah. How's
All good.
the baby life treating you?
Good. I have a 3-year-old son and a baby on the way. So,
Oh yeah, on the way.
yeah, she isn't arrived yet, but 6 to 7 weeks to go. So,
Okay,
exciting times
exciting.
in the
Yeah.
Engelman household.
Ready for the sleepless nights?
Never ready for the sleepless nights unless they're in a dark club at 6 a.m.
Exactly. I can imagine. Yeah. Thanks for taking the time to do this, man.
Sure.
For everyone who's listening or watching, they might have seen you before. We've done this, I think, about a year and a half ago.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
Hmm.
And the pace of the industry, things changed so quickly that I'm sure it was a different time then.
Yeah, I'm not sure what we went over to last time, but the main thing that I wanted to talk with you about was the whole streaming thing, because I kind of feel that things are changing somehow,
Yeah.
and I was wondering like how do you deal with that? As in, yeah, how do you deal with that at Atlantic Records?
Well, when you say things are changing, I would say that the biggest change is general growth
Mm-hmm.
overall. I don't have the stats in front of me, to be honest, but the rate of growth on the streaming side is enormous,
Mm-hmm.
and not just at one specific um, partner or digital service provider, but across the board, there's growth industry wide. And the good thing is that there isn't just one player. There's multiple players in the game, and in order to sort of thrive, competition is really helpful, and it's a fun time to be in the business right now.
Mm.
That being said, it's also a very challenging time. You hear all kinds of different numbers, but the latest number that I've heard is that there's 70,000 new songs delivered to digital service providers per week.
Holy shit,
So 70,000 songs every single week.
that's
If
a
you
lot.
do the math, that is an enormous amount of music,
Yeah.
and therefore there's a lot of clutter. And cutting through the clutter to find the shiny diamond, or to identify and grow that shiny diamond is really challenging. So
Mm.
we're faced with unique challenges, but also unique opportunities.
Yeah, and how do you think that a label does that differently from all that releasing by yourself? Because all those DIY distribution channels are available now.
Yeah.
And what value can a label like Atlantic, for example, deliver in that matter?
Well, that's a very good question and something that we're faced with daily. There are a lot of people that think that they might not need a label to help them grow,
Mm-hmm.
and there's certainly some truth to that. What I would say is having the support of a label gives you an army behind you,
Yeah.
and you can win a fight as a soldier, but you can't necessarily win a war.
Yeah.
And having a label to help you in all the different aspects of your career, not just getting playlisting or growing your streams, I think is really impactful, but helping you creatively grow as an artist in not only musically, but
Mm-hmm.
in terms of your merch and your touring and your you know your syncs and your licenses and your radio story. There's a lot of different lanes that labels use to help market and grow an artist that independent artists can certainly do, but I think it's a lot more challenging.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. But do you think that because on one side I'm a big fan of releasing tracks yourself, depending on the situation of the artist, as in getting signed by a label is getting harder and harder because, as you mentioned, 70,000 tracks. Of those
Yeah,
70,000 tracks, there's probably 30 or 40,000 artists who are trying to get signed,
yeah,
and most of them send their music to the same labels, to the top
yeah,
20 labels worldwide.
sure.
Um, so, where I see the value of releasing a track by yourself simply is when you're not being recognized by a label or simply didn't get heard by a label, you still can get the advantage of releasing it yourself in order to get noticed by a label, by high performing tracks, for example, or...
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so you're absolutely right. And I think one of the biggest sort of changes in the music industry today is it's so data driven, you know?
Yeah.
In the old days, it was driven by gut and sales and, you know, things like that. Nowadays, you know, the machine tells people, like, tells us what is reacting and what isn't.
Yeah.
And it tells our partners what's reacting and what isn't. So, you know, there are certain things you can do to influence that, but for the most part, you know, everything is at the mercy of performance of a song.
Mm-hmm.
So when you release something independently, if you don't have a story yet, it helps you to build that story to the point where, to your point, you start getting noticed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at some point you reach a time when you have to kind of decide if you want to partner up with a label or if you want to continue to do it on your own.
Yeah.
And I personally believe that there's a ceiling to how far you can go if you do it on your own. There's probably 5, maybe 10 artists in the world that have achieved mass level success by doing it on their own, if even that many.
Mm-hmm.
So I think having label support is always great if you can get it. But
Yeah.
to your point again, the ability to put things out on your own is something that is a lot easier than it was 10 years ago and 15 years ago. I think YouTube and SoundCloud have always been a little bit easier, but now even with Spotify and Apple and some of the other, you know, places that music is discovered, they've made it a little bit more accessible for artists to do it on their own.
So, knowing that there's so many music that gets released every week, knowing that there's so many artists who want to get signed, what is the best way, in your opinion, to have the option to get heard by a label?
Build a story. You know, it's, you know, we use the term moves the needle in the business a lot. Like, what moves the needle? You know, what drives a stream to grow, you know? And the reality is that there isn't necessarily one thing outside of major radio play or a massive global sync, you know, that can take you from 0 to 100, you know? I think we see things like TikTok becoming very important, but again, it's crowded out there in TikTok too. So not every song is going to become a TikTok viral hit. It certainly makes a difference, but I think, you know, creating a story for yourself is what's going to get your attention. And the way that you create that story, because there isn't one thing that moves the needle, is to literally do 20 things and hope that those 20 things collectively can get you noticed.
Yeah. And when you say build a story, what is it that you exactly mean?
I mean, basically have a week over week stream growth in either one territory or globally, and, you know, showing adoption, showing that people want to own your music by saving it to their own libraries and adding it to their own playlists. And, you know, we call that user collection growth. Seeing users add songs to their user collections, that shows adoption. That's the new ownership. And so we look for those kinds of things when identifying whether something is a hit or not.
It's actually interesting, like making the comparison with saving it to a playlist with buying a CD.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy because in the old days, you know, we used to build demand toward a purchase. And then once that purchase was made, you know, you had your money. You had your dollar or however much, you know, a song might cost to buy. So you would build demand to that. Now, because of the way streaming works, there's a long tail in the back of it. And so you're starting from when the song is released. Instead of building to that purchase, you're actually building from the release backwards and hopefully growing that stream. But, you know, it's not just about having somebody buy something and then you don't care what they do to it with it. You don't care if they listen to it again and again. You in this case, you need people to listen again and again. You need them to adopt it and own it. And now once they've saved it, it's you have to have them play it over and over again in order to make money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's super interesting, because if I have a look at my own behavior, like I only have one playlist in which I have like my favorite songs, not genre related, just all the songs I like are going in that playlist. And I never delete one. And I have that playlist for over probably 4 or 5 years. So there's like 400 or 500 tracks in it. And I just turn it on and put it on shuffle, and it keeps going, you know?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I've got the same thing, my own personal private playlists, you know?
Yeah, super interesting. But so the way to get signed to a label is building a story. And what I see happening with a few of my clients is that they started building their story like a year ago, and now the labels are reaching out to them.
Yeah.
Instead of the other way around, right?
Yeah, it's sort of an interesting thing, because if you go in on something as a label and it's super early, you're taking a risk. But if you don't get in on something super early, you're also taking a risk, because then other labels are going to be interested, and at that point you start getting into like a whatchamacallit, like a bidding war, where your worth is more. So in some ways, as an artist, you're almost better off kind of getting to that point where you're big enough that you've now created that interest. And I think the forward-thinking labels do reach out and invest in things before they're at that level. And it happens, I think, both ways. Sometimes the labels get in early, sometimes the artist, the labels are late and they sleep on things, and they grow to a point where they're so big that you're now competing with a lot of other labels. So yeah.
And with what was something that popped up in my mind? What was it? Oh yeah, the long-term and short-term deals. As in, what I heard and what I've seen in the last couple of months is that there's a lot of labels who are only looking to sign long-term deals with artists because they want to build towards something. And not just sign one-offs, like sign long-term deals. Yeah.
I think we are of the mind that we're in that mindset as a label. And I do think most labels are more interested in the long-term deals now than in the one-off single signings and things like that. It's just, if you don't invest in an artist and help them to build their career, you're going to end up just using your time to have a one story, instead of multiple stories. And when we do long-term deals with artists, we want to invest in our time and energy and effort and money in building them as an artist instead of just as a song.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if you sign a short-term thing or a one-song deal or an EP deal or something, then you're basically just building a song. And at the end of the day, there's so much more value in building a career.
Yeah. But there's a risk, though, for labels, because let's say you sign for 5 years and you are building that career with that artist. After that 5 years, that artist has the option to leave, right?
They do. And, there's a constant negotiation and renegotiation with artists. And, it's, it's rare that there's a deal that's beyond a length of time that's comfortable for both the label and the artist. So I think there's every deal is 100% different. There's not two deals that look the same. So, I think that there is, that's true.
Okay. And with the whole TikTok thing, because I noticed it as well, that there's a couple of tracks that just really popped through the whole TikTok movement.
Oh yeah.
Is that something you take in consideration? I'm not sure if you're responsible for the marketing of tracks.
I'm not. No.
Okay.
I'm not in. Our digital marketing department is really more responsible for that. And the problem with TikTok and other sort of viral stories, do you remember the Harlem Shake by Bauer? And that whole, everyone was doing that thing, the Harlem Shake and all this stuff. I think you can't force virality,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and people try all the time. You know, we try, everyone tries. It's human nature.
Yeah.
But when something truly goes viral, whether it's on TikTok or some other, mechanism, it's an intangible thing that I think is not creatable or forcible,
Mm-hmm.
and people feel it if it's forced.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Look at OK Go, who had that song where they're on the treadmills videos like years ago, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember that, but that video went viral, and for a long time people were trying to recreate similar circumstances, and it just didn't work because so I think at the end of the day, creativity is going to be what drives the future of the business,
Yeah.
and the artists that are more creative are going to continue to thrive,
Mm-hmm.
because you have to separate yourself somehow. And if you're just putting your music out there and hoping that people listen and like it, then you're more than likely going to fail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you need to offer more than just your music, right?
Yep.
And I
Yep.
really believe that's where content comes in, as in
Yes.
that's where you can differentiate yourself from other artists, because that's where you can show your personality. Like
Yes.
a lot of music. Sorry?
Yeah. No, I was going to say, I totally agree with you. And one of the things that we tell our artists and managers is, things that are being looked at by our partners and by the DSPs is engagement and connectivity,
Mm-hmm.
and how engaged an artist is with their fans.
Yeah.
Now, what that means is, for better or worse, social media is just a intangible and integral part of an artist campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Our partners are living on social media. They're watching. They're looking at how artists engage and interact with their fans. They're watching that very closely. And content is one of those things that you can use on social media and outside of it to differentiate yourself more. So I think creating lots of pieces of compelling content is super important. I think being active and engaged on social media is important. But I also think that there's other forms of engagement with fans. Mm-hmm. Touring is really important.
Yeah.
I think touring is one thing.
Yeah, but that's really hard, because touring most of the time only comes once you've got the success with your music, right?
Yes and no. I mean, I think that if you look at, some success stories in the past, artists that grinded and opened for the opener and did house parties and DJ'd at, universities and, did radio shows in the middle of the night and, put themselves out there in any way, shape, or form, put themselves in a better position than artists that are saying, oh, I'm not going to do that because I'm not at that level yet, So I think you have to grind in today's music business. You have to work.
Yeah.
And we have artists that, some of them are just the hardest working artists you ever met,
Mm-hmm.
and others, they're a bit more lazy, quite honestly. And they are expecting things to be handed to them. And, it's, I think, important to remember that when you're competing with 70,000 people a week to get your song on a playlist or to grow your streams, you have to grind and work really hard and never stop working. It's a 24/7 job.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a worldwide business right now.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're only focusing on, in your case, the States, or in my case, the Netherlands or whatever. It's the whole world at once.
Yeah.
And that makes it pretty difficult as well, I guess.
It is. I mean, there are still certain stories that can be developed regionally and locally. Mm. We have artists that have thrived in the Nordics and from there sort of spread to other territories and then ultimately come over to the United States. We've had other artists that have started as big artists in the United States and then ultimately have come over to, Europe and other parts of the world. So I do think that there's still an advantage to building a story locally and, having that spread out You know, it doesn't always happen on a global level. Sometimes
Yeah, true.
you have to start in your town, and then that becomes in your city, and then that becomes, and then people start hearing about you, and oh, did you know about that artist? They're blowing up in Dublin or in
Yeah.
Houston, Texas, or whatever it might be, and it starts to spread from there. And I think that there's a good amount that comes from that.
Yeah, but again, I think that that's the story that you were telling about in the beginning, you know? That's the story from that artist. Like, I've started here and I started
Yes, yes,
grinding and building it in my hometown and then went to
yeah.
locally and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I mean, I love this story of Avicii.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was, years ago, and Avicii was first starting, and he was putting out songs
Yeah,
every
so
week,
much. On
leaking
blogs,
songs
right?
on the blogs,
Yeah,
multiple songs sometimes in weeks, and there were hundreds of songs out in a year. And the thing is, with him, it wasn't just quantity; it was quality.
yeah,
And everyone was starting to notice. But he grinded in the beginning and he really worked hard. And there's a lot of artists nowadays that are looking for a paycheck.
mm,
And I find in particular when it comes to remixes, sometimes artists, they take the paycheck, they do a remix, and it's okay, it's not revolutionary. They
yeah,
just wanted to get the paycheck and then put it out and see what happens. And you don't see them supporting it in their sets. You don't see them promoting it. And it's the same thing with featured artists. Sometimes an artist features on a song,
mm-hmm.
they get a big paycheck, and then they don't support the song. And it's like, that doesn't benefit you as an artist, as a producer. It doesn't benefit the artist that you're remixing or featuring on.
Yeah,
And, if you want to succeed, you have to work again. And
yeah.
you've got to make it quality and not just quantity. And you can't just take the paycheck. You have to make sure that what you're putting out is creatively up to par.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, it's interesting to talk about Avicii actually because I still remember as well. He was on the Layback Luke blog, I guess. Yeah,
yeah,
on the Layback
yeah,
Luke
yeah,
blog,
sure.
and
Yeah,
like loads and loads of stuff went uploaded there, and like every week we were looking at it, it's like, oh, what the fuck is this? And oh, it sounds like Avicii, sounds with the piano or whatever, super
yeah,
melodical.
yeah,
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 but I do believe that in some form, quantity also matters. Like, yes, quality is a thing; it should be quality, but it's
yep.
hard to decide what's quality or what's not.
You're 100% right about that. And
Hmm.
the thing is, in a way, you almost need both. You need quality and quantity,
Yeah,
because I do feel that if you're the type of artist or producer, especially in the dance electronic space, that releases one song every 3 months or one song every 6 months, right?
hmm,
And you're not doing any remixes and you're not putting any content out there, people are going to lose interest.
yeah,
The attention span of kids today and consumers in general, which is being grabbed by Netflix and by all these other various places, is pretty short. And if you're not constantly hitting people over the head saying, remember me, remember me, remember me, they're going to forget you.
yeah,
And we have artists that I encourage all the time: put out bootlegs, put out remixes, put out originals, put out tutorials, put out content, put out videos of live videos, put out acoustic videos, put out, all these things together, and build out a 6 to 12 week plan where every week you're hitting people with a new piece of content.
hmm,
That's the only way to really do it, because if you're never putting anything out, you're just not going to be competitive with other artists that are actively engaged all over the place.
yeah, yeah. True. I'm a big believer of that. Like music and content at the
Yeah.
same time, those should
Yeah.
level up, and then you're on a good way. Especially as a starting artist. It's the only way to get
Yes.
noticed, to build that story, to load that story.
Yeah.
So,
100%.
looking into the future, what do you think? A small prediction, like what do you think is going to happen in the upcoming year in the whole world of streaming?
Um, I mean, voice activation has become massive
Hmm.
in the United States in particular.
With the Alexas.
Amazon Alexa Echo, Amazon
Yeah,
Echo
yeah.
fueled by the Alexa is a massive thing. Apple is in almost every car with their, CarPlay
Yeah.
and, Siri and voice activation there. It's a big thing. People are super busy all the time, and everything is about ease and access, and being able to say something, like play this song or play that song. It's just becoming more and more of the reality, and I think it's going to continue to grow and evolve. And I would predict that becomes a much more prevalent driver of streams as things continue to move forward. I'm trying to think of what other predictions there are. I think, another piece of advice for artists is music has become a little bit homogenous because of the volume. And I think creativity in sound and sonic is going to become more and more important, because while songs are still the most important part of a release, melody and lyric is still the most important part of a release. There's no denying that an amazing, brilliant song, is the biggest thing. Creative sounds are also, I think, important. And when you look at the past and what's driven progress in music, in every decade, there's been movement in sonic, whether it was the 60s or the 70s punk turning into disco, turning into new wave in the 80s, turning into house in the 90s, turning and hip hop, and the evolution of hip hop and pop music, it's, I think, very important. And I think people are going to start getting bored with the sort of sonic sameness of music and the homogenous nature of it. So I think people are going to have to start getting creative in the production. And I do think that music is very cyclical, and they do say that every 20 years things sort of repeat themselves and start coming back. But there are certain genres that overperform in the streaming space and certain that underperform. And I do kind of feel like rock music and alternative music with guitars and things like that, which were very prevalent in the 90s and even early thousands, I think that there's space for that to come back and grow. And right now there isn't that much of that happening. And, I think that there could be a place for that in the future.
I think exactly, like the combination between organic sounds and digital sounds is something. Of course, it has been done before, and there's like Avicii with the whole album, the whole country album. I think that there's a lot of producers that could start focusing on that, because the whole digital music is kind of lacking emotion, or I don't know. I don't really know how to explain it, but it feels like people are looking for more organic things.
You look at Little Nas X, who had the biggest hit in years last year. He merged hip hop with country, and that was to your point. But what was the last thing you said? Sorry.
That people are more.
The emotion.
Yeah.
The lack of emotion. Yeah. I mean, I think in dance music, if you look at the mid to late 2000s, like 2008, 2009, when there was the Swedish House Mafia and David Guetta and Calvin Harris and Skrillex, the energy that those artists brought to this scene, I feel hasn't come back in a long time.
True.
The pure energy of walking into a Swedish House Mafia gig, especially when they were playing clubs, or a Skrillex gig, in his early days, and even a festival gig, it's lacking a little bit. And I like a lot of the music that is working today. I think that there's a lot of great music out there, but I do think that there's a spark that is missing a little bit, and we need to find that producer that's going to have that spark, that's going to create a bit of a movement, because there isn't a movement right now. There's a lot of different pockets and a lot of different things working in different regions and different places, but there's no movement. And I think we need that as an industry.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, definitely 100% agree with you, man.
Yeah.
It's an interesting time, and I think it's harder than ever as an artist, but at the same time also easier than ever, because of all the opportunities you have as an artist to release your tracks yourself and cutting out the middleman in a lot of cases. But at the same time, like the amount of people that are trying to become an artist has just exploded.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
for a label as well, that I think that's difficult because you have to filter out the noise and to try to pick the best, right?
Yes, sir.
That's difficult. So yeah, I want to thank you for taking the time to do this, man. I think there's a lot of value that artists can get from this again.
Yeah. Thank you.
And
Thank
as
you
you
for
said
having
at
me.
the
I
beginning,
appreciate
it's a moving thing, so we'll probably talk in a year and a half again
it. Yes, sir.
to see what's going on. I want to wish
Yeah.
you the best of luck with the upcoming weeks with your family.
Thank you.
And
you.
Let's stay in touch.
Awesome, dude. Thank you very much. I always appreciate coming on. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, man. No worries.
All right.
Bye.